I think I didn't do anything wrong, just showed my husband that I could still turn heads, even if it meant handing our world to another man. But the day the legal papers landed on my kitchen table, I realized he had been watching, waiting, and collecting proof while everyone else laughed at him. Before we dive deeper into this story, I have one small request. Please subscribe, drop a like, comment, and hit that hype button to boost this channel so more people can discover these incredible stories. The morning light filtered through our apartment windows as I scrolled through my phone, a familiar flutter in my chest when I saw Elliot's name. 3 missed calls from last night, after Daniel had gone to bed. I quickly deleted the call log, a habit I'd perfected over the past month. "Coffee's ready," Daniel called from the kitchen, his voice carrying that same tired tone it had held for weeks. At 34, my husband had settled into a routine that felt more like resignation than contentment. His project management job paid the bills, but it had drained something vital from him. Or maybe I had just stopped noticing what was vital about him. I slipped into the kitchen where 7-year-old Lila sat picking at her cereal, her dark hair still messy from sleep. She looked up at me with those serious eyes that seemed to absorb everything around her. "Mummy, why were you laughing so late last night?" she asked innocently. Daniel's hand paused over his coffee mug. I felt heat rise in my cheeks but forced a smile. "Just watching something funny on my phone, sweetheart. Nothing important." But Daniel was watching me now, really watching, and I didn't like the calculation in his expression. We'd been married for 8 years, and I knew that look. It was the same one he wore when reviewing project budgets, looking for discrepancies. "Vesna, we should talk," he said quietly. "About what? I'm running late for work." I grabbed my purse, avoiding his gaze. "Lila, brush your teeth. Daddy will walk you to school." The real estate office where I worked as an administrative assistant buzzed with its usual morning energy. I settled at my desk, but my mind wandered to Elliot Barn, my ex from university, who had recently moved back to town. When he'd reached out on social media 6 weeks ago, it had felt like a harmless reconnection. He was still the same charming freelance designer who had once made me feel like the most interesting woman in any room. My phone buzzed with a text from him. "Coffee later. I have some exciting news to share." The thrill that shot through me was intoxicating. When had Daniel last had exciting news? When had he last looked at me like I was worth pursuing? That evening, I returned home to find Daniel sitting at our small dining table, with papers spread before him. "Phone bills," I realized with a jolt. "Find anything interesting?" I asked, forcing lightness into my voice. "Actually, yes." He held up a highlighted sheet. 43 calls to the same number in the past month, most after 10 p.m. My heart hammered, but I laughed, a sound that came out sharper than intended. "Daniel, seriously, you're checking my phone records like some paranoid husband. I'm trying to understand why my wife has become a stranger. Maybe because you never talk to me anymore. Maybe because you come home, eat dinner in silence, and fall asleep watching the news. When was the last time you asked about my day? My dreams? Anything that matters to me?" Lila appeared in the doorway, clutching her stuffed rabbit. "Are you fighting?" "No, baby," I said quickly, shooting Daniel a warning look. "Daddy's just being silly about work stuff." But Daniel's expression had hardened. After Lila went to bed, I found him in our room, typing on his laptop. "Who are you emailing?" I asked. "Adam. Just family stuff." Adam, his younger brother, and the lawyer, who had always been too perceptive for his own good. A chill ran down my spine, but I pushed it away. Daniel was being dramatic. All I'd done was reconnect with an old friend. All I'd done was remember what it felt like to be desired. The next morning, I posted a photo from my coffee date with Elliot on social media. We looked good together, his arm casually draped over my chair, both of us laughing. I tagged him as catching up with old friends and added heart-eye emojis. The likes poured in. Comments from college friends. "You two look amazing." "Some things never change." Still the perfect couple. I felt alive in a way I hadn't in years. This was proof that I was still desirable, still worth pursuing, still capable of making a man light up when I walked into a room. What I didn't know was that Daniel had already forwarded those phone records to Adam, along with a simple message: I need to know my options. The coffee shop downtown had become our regular meeting spot. Elliot and I had developed an easy rhythm, Tuesday and Thursday afternoons, when I could slip away from work early. He would already be there, sketching in his notebook, looking effortlessly creative in a way that Daniel's corporate polo shirts could never match. You look radiant, Elliot said, as I slid into the seat across from him. Marriage agrees with you. The irony wasn't lost on me, but I smiled anyway. Some days more than others. He leaned forward, lowering his voice conspiratorially. I have to admit, I've been thinking about you a lot. About us. About what might have been if we hadn't been so young and stupid. My pulse quickened. This was the validation I'd been craving. Proof that I was still the woman who could captivate Elliot Barn, the man who had once been the catch of our entire university. Elliot, I know, you're married, but can't we just enjoy this connection we have? I glanced around the coffee shop, suddenly aware that we might be seen. But the thrill of potential discovery only added to the excitement. We're just friends catching up, I said, but my voice carried a different message entirely. What I didn't notice was Janet Morrison from Lila's school, sitting 2 tables away. Her phone angled toward us as she typed rapidly. That weekend was Lila's school play. I'd mentioned it to Elliot in passing, not really expecting him to show interest. But when I arrived at the elementary school auditorium, there he was, holding a small bouquet of flowers. For the star's mother, he said with that devastating smile. I felt every eye in the room turn toward us, some curious, some knowing. I should have felt embarrassed, but instead I felt powerful. Here was this attractive, successful man choosing to spend his Friday evening at a children's play, for me. Vesna. Daniel appeared beside us, his face carefully neutral. I didn't know Elliot was coming. I mentioned it to him, I said breezily. He loves supporting local theatre. Elliot extended his hand to Daniel with practiced charm. Hope you don't mind me crashing your family event. Vesna spoke so fondly of Lila's performance. I watched Daniel shake Elliot's hand, noting the way my husband's jaw tightened almost imperceptibly. Around us, other parents were watching, some trying to be discreet, others openly staring. When the lights dimmed, Elliot naturally sat beside me, with Lila's empty seat on my other side. Daniel moved to the end of our row, then, after a moment's hesitation, walked to the back of the auditorium to stand against the wall. Where's Daddy going? Lila whispered when she found us during intermission. He wanted a better view from back there, I said quickly. But Lila's eyes were troubled as she looked between Elliot and the back of the room, where her father stood alone, arms crossed, watching everything with that same calculating expression. After the play, as parents milled around congratulating their children, I overheard fragments of conversations. Together at the coffee shop on Tuesday. My sister saw them at, "Poor Daniel, he must know." The whispers should have embarrassed me, but they didn't. They were proof that people noticed, that my connection with Elliot was significant enough to generate talk. I was still a woman worth gossiping about. Hannah Morland, Daniel's mother, appeared at my elbow during the reception. At 61, she'd never been one to mince words. "Vesna, dear, might I have a word?" She guided me to a quieter corner, her grip firm on my arm. "I don't know what game you think you're playing," she said quietly. "But that man is not your husband, and this is not appropriate." "Hannah, Elliot is just a friend. You're reading too much into..." "Am I? Because from where I'm standing, it looks like you're parading another man around in front of your husband and daughter like some kind of trophy." Heat flashed through me. "Maybe if your son paid half as much attention to me as Elliot does, we wouldn't be having this conversation." Hannah's eyes narrowed. "My son works hard to provide for his family. He comes home every night. He's never given you reason to doubt his commitment. What exactly has he done to deserve this humiliation? I turned away from her, but her words followed me. Across the room, I caught Daniel's eye. He was still standing alone, but now he was holding his phone, and I had the unsettling feeling he had been recording something. That night, I posted photos from the play on social media. Lila on stage, glowing in her costume. A group shot of families, and one of Elliot and me, his hand resting lightly on my back as we smiled at the camera. The comments were immediate. "What a lovely couple you make." "Elliot, you're such a supportive friend." "Where's Daniel in these pics?" I liked every positive comment, basking in the attention. But later, as I was getting ready for bed, I found something that made my blood run cold. Hidden under the passenger seat of Daniel's car, which I'd borrowed to run errands, was a small device I didn't recognize. When I Googled the model number, my hands began to shake. Dash cam, motion activated, 7-day recording loop. I thought about all the times Elliot had walked me to my car. All the times he'd leaned in close to say goodbye. All the times his car had been parked outside our building when Daniel came home from work. Daniel had been watching. Daniel had been collecting evidence. And I had been giving him everything he needed. The dashcam changed everything and nothing. I confronted Daniel about it the next morning, waving the small device in his face like an accusation. "This is insane, Daniel. You're spying on me." He was making Lila's lunch with methodical precision, not looking up from the sandwich he was constructing. "I'm documenting unusual activity around my car. It's parked in a public space." "Unusual activity? You mean my friend walking me to—" "Your friend who visits our building 3 times a week. Your friend whose car is here when I come home from work. Your friend who somehow knows Lila's schedule better than I do." I felt trapped between anger and panic. "You're being paranoid." "Am I?" Daniel finally looked at me, and I was startled by the coldness in his eyes. "Last Tuesday you told me you were working late, but Elliot's car was here from 3 p.m. to 7 p.m. On Thursday, you said you were having dinner with your mother, but there are 2 coffee cups in our sink, and Marta posted photos of her book club that same evening." My mouth went dry. He had been paying attention to everything. "I don't have to account for every minute of my day to you." "No, but you do have to stop lying to me." Lila appeared in the kitchen doorway, her backpack dragging behind her. "Mommy, why are you shouting?" "I'm not shouting, baby. Daddy and I are just talking." But Lila's eyes were wide with the particular anxiety children develop when their world starts feeling unstable. She'd been clinging to me more lately, asking strange questions. Why didn't Daddy eat dinner with us yesterday? Why was Elliot here when she got home from school? Why did Mommy's phone buzz so much at bedtime? At work, I found myself constantly checking my phone for messages from Elliot, but his responses had become shorter, less frequent. When I suggested meeting for coffee, he begged off with vague excuses about deadlines and client meetings. Finally, I cornered him with a direct call. "Are you avoiding me?" "Vesna, I think we need to be more careful. People are talking." "Let them talk. We're not doing anything wrong." "Aren't we?" His voice was quiet. "Because it feels like we're building towards something that's going to hurt a lot of people." "I thought you said you'd been thinking about us, about what might have been." "I have, but what might have been is different from what should be now. You have a family." The rejection stung more than I wanted to admit. "So you're just going to disappear, use me for some nostalgic fantasy and then run when things get real?" "Vesna..." I hung up on him. That evening, Daniel came home with a manila folder and set it on our dining table with deliberate ceremony. "What's this?" I asked. "Documentation." I opened the folder to find a detailed log, written in Daniel's precise handwriting. March 15th, Vesna claimed to work late. Elliot Barnes' vehicle, license plate JKL 4429, parked outside building 315, 7:20 p.m. March 17th, Vesna claimed dinner with mother. 2 coffee cups in sink, unfamiliar cologne scent in apartment hallway. March 22nd, Vesna at work meeting. Credit card charge at downtown coffee shop, 2:47 p.m. Page after page of my movements, my lies, my secret meetings, all documented with timestamps and evidence. This is sick, Daniel. You're stalking your own wife. I'm protecting my family. From what? From me having a friend? From me having someone who actually pays attention to me? From you having an affair? The word hung between us like a blade. I wanted to deny it, but what could I say? That it was just emotional, that we'd never crossed certain lines. The truth was, I'd been living in the space between married and single, committed and available, faithful and unfaithful. I'm not having an affair, I said finally. Then explain this. He pulled out printed screenshots of my text messages with Elliot. Somehow, he'd gotten access to our conversations, the late-night exchanges, the inside jokes, the increasingly intimate tone of our communication. My face burned as I read my own words. I think about you constantly. Daniel doesn't understand me the way you do. Sometimes I wonder what my life would be like if I'd made different choices. How did you get these? Does it matter? Are you going to deny you wrote them? I stared at the papers, seeing my marriage dissolve in black and white. Daniel, I can explain. No. His voice was quiet but final. I don't want explanations. I want honesty, and I want it to stop. And if I don't... He closed the folder with careful precision. Then I'll make decisions based on what's best for Lila and me. That night, Lila crawled into our bed around midnight, something she hadn't done in months. I had a bad dream, she whispered, but as I held her small, trembling body, I wondered if she was dreaming at all, or if she was simply seeking comfort in a world that had begun to feel uncertain and strange. In the morning, I found Daniel's side of the bed empty and a note on his pillow. Staying at Adam's for a few days. We'll talk when you're ready to be honest. I crumpled the note, but I couldn't crumple the growing realization that I had pushed my quiet, methodical husband too far, and that he had been preparing for this moment much longer than I'd realized. My mother's voice crackled through the phone with righteous indignation. He left? Just like that? Vesna, darling, men are all the same. They can't handle a strong, independent woman. I was sitting in our empty apartment, Lila at school, surrounded by the evidence of Daniel's methodical departure. He'd taken only what he needed. Work clothes, toiletries, his laptop. Everything else remained exactly as it was, like he was making a point about who was disrupting our family. It's not that simple, Mama. Isn't it? You reconnect with an old friend, and suddenly your husband can't cope with you having a life outside his control. This is exactly what happened to your cousin Maria. Marta Kovac had never liked Daniel. Not really. She'd been polite during our courtship, gracious at our wedding, but I'd always sensed her disappointment that I'd chosen stability over passion. Now, at 58 and twice divorced herself, she seemed almost vindicated by our problems. Maybe this is a blessing, she continued. Maybe it's time you remembered who you were before you became just Daniel's wife. Her words should have been comforting, but they left me feeling hollow. I'd spent so much energy proving I could still attract Elliot that I'd forgotten to ask myself what I actually wanted. The answer came that evening when Lila asked, "When is Daddy coming home?" "I don't know, sweetheart." "Is it because of Elliot?" The question hit me like a physical blow. My 7-year-old daughter had connected dots I'd been desperately trying to keep separate. Why would you think that? Because Daddy gets sad when Elliot comes over, and you get happy. And now Daddy's gone and Elliot doesn't come over anymore, and you're sad too. I stared at my daughter, realizing that in my quest to prove my desirability, I'd forgotten that the most important people in my life were the ones who already loved me. But pride is a stubborn thing. Instead of calling Daniel, I called Elliot. "I need to see you." "Vesna, I told you. My husband left. Whatever you were worried about, it's already happened." There was a long pause. "I'm sorry, I never wanted... Just meet me, please." We met at our usual coffee shop, but everything felt different. Elliot seemed smaller somehow, less magnetic. The thrill of secrecy was gone, replaced by the messy reality of consequences. I feel terrible about this, he said, fidgeting with his cup. About what? About us? About him? About your daughter? I never meant for anyone to get hurt. But you said you'd been thinking about us, about what might have been. I was being nostalgic, Vesna. I was enjoying the attention, but I never intended to break up a marriage. The words stung because they revealed a truth I'd been avoiding. Elliot had been playing a game, and I'd mistaken it for love. So what now? Now you fix your marriage. What if I don't want to? He looked at me with something that might have been pity. Then you figure out what you do want, but you don't use me as an excuse to avoid that decision. I left the coffee shop feeling more alone than I had in years. At home, I found Hannah Morland, sitting in the lobby of our building, clearly waiting for me. We need to talk, she said. I led her upstairs, dreading the conversation, but knowing I couldn't avoid it. Hannah had always been direct, but now she seemed barely contained. I just left my son at his brother's apartment, she said, without preamble. He's devastated, Vesna. Completely broken. Hannah, I never meant, didn't you? Because from where I'm standing, it looks like you meant to humiliate him. You meant to parade another man around in front of his friends, his family, his daughter. I just wanted him to notice me again. By making him look like a fool, by making everyone in your community wonder what was wrong with him, that his wife needed to find attention elsewhere. I sank onto our couch, suddenly exhausted. I felt invisible. So you made him invisible instead. Hannah's voice softened slightly. Vesna, I know marriage is hard. I know my son can be quiet, maybe too focused on providing rather than connecting. But he loves you. He's always loved you. Then why does it feel like we're strangers? Because you stopped talking to each other and started talking to everyone else. That evening, I tried calling Daniel. The phone went straight to voicemail. I tried texting. Can we please talk? No response. I called Adam's number. He doesn't want to speak with you right now, Adam said, his lawyer's voice carefully neutral. Adam, please. I know I made mistakes, but Vesna, I need you to understand something. Daniel came to me 3 weeks ago asking about his legal options. I've been advising him to document everything, to protect himself and Lila. My blood ran cold. Legal options? He loves you. He's been hoping you'd end this on your own, but he won't be humiliated indefinitely. It's over. I ended it with Elliot today. That's good, but ending the affair isn't the same as repairing the damage. After I hung up, I sat in our quiet apartment, really looking at it for the first time in months. Photos of our wedding, our honeymoon, Lila's first steps, evidence of a life built together, a partnership I'd been systematically undermining. I picked up my phone and typed a long message to Daniel. I know I've hurt you. I know I've been selfish and cruel. I don't know how to fix this, but I want to try. Please come home so we can talk. I hit send and waited. Hours passed. No response. Finally, at nearly midnight, my phone buzzed. I'll be by tomorrow to pick up more clothes. If you want to talk, we can do it then. But Vesna, I'm not the same man who left 3 days ago. Don't expect me to be. I stared at the message, realizing that while I'd been playing games with Elliot, Daniel had been transforming into someone I didn't recognize. Someone who was no longer willing to be taken for granted. Someone who had learned to protect himself from me. The manila envelope arrived on a Tuesday morning via certified mail. I signed for it with shaking hands, though I already knew what it contained. The return address was from Hartley & Associates, Adam's law firm. Inside were papers that made everything brutally official. Petition for legal separation and motion for temporary custody arrangement. I read the documents twice, my coffee growing cold as the legal language translated into devastating reality. Daniel was requesting primary custody of Lila, citing emotional neglect and inappropriate behavior creating an unstable home environment. He wanted me to have supervised visitation until we could establish appropriate boundaries. Attached were exhibits that made my stomach lurch, printed screenshots of my social media posts featuring Elliot, time-stamped photos from the school play, witness statements from other parents, and most damaging of all, a detailed log of every lie I'd told, cross-referenced with evidence proving my deception. I called Daniel immediately. The phone went straight to voicemail. I called Adam. This is insane. He can't take Lila away from me. He's not taking her away, Vesna. He's requesting primary custody based on documented evidence of emotional instability and poor judgment. I made mistakes, but I'm still her mother. Yes, and you'll remain her mother. But Daniel has built a compelling case that Lila's primary residence should be with the parent who's been consistently present and emotionally available. I thought about all the evenings I'd been distracted by my phone, all the times I'd snapped at Lila when she interrupted my conversations with Elliot, all the moments I'd chosen my fantasy over my reality. What do? You get your own lawyer, and Vesna, you stop posting on social media about this, immediately. But I was already scrolling through Facebook, crafting a post that would tell my side of the story, going through a difficult time. Sometimes the people who promise to love you forever are the first to abandon you when you need support. Grateful for friends who see the real me. Single mom, Arsha staying strong, truth wins. The responses poured in. You deserve so much better. Daniel always seemed controlling. Stay strong, beautiful. Some men can't handle confident women. Each comment felt like validation, proof that I wasn't the villain in this story. I shared articles about emotional abuse and gaslighting, carefully crafting a narrative where I was the victim of a cold, calculating husband who couldn't tolerate my independence. But then Hannah Morland commented, Vesna, this is heartbreaking to watch. Please consider how this public campaign might affect Lila. And suddenly, other voices began emerging. I saw the photos from the school play that didn't look like friendship. My daughter is in Lila's class. She's been asking why Mommy and Daddy don't live together anymore. Maybe there are two sides to this story. I deleted the negative comments, but they kept coming. People who had witnessed my coffee dates with Elliot, who had seen us together at various events, who had watched Daniel standing alone while I flaunted my friendship. My mother called, furious. How dare he try to take Lila? We need to fight this, Vesna. We need to show everyone what kind of man abandons his family. But when I picked Lila up from school that afternoon, she was quiet in a way that scared me. Mummy, Sarah's mom asked me if you and Daddy are getting divorced. My heart clenched. What did you tell her? I said I don't know. Are you? I pulled over, unable to drive, while looking at my daughter's confused, frightened face. I don't know, baby. Daddy and I are having some problems. Because of Elliot? The question was so direct, so innocent, and so devastating that I started crying right there in the car. Oh, sweetheart, no. This isn't your fault, and it's not Elliot's fault. Sometimes grown-ups make mistakes. Did you make a mistake? I looked at my 7-year-old daughter, who was asking the question I'd been avoiding for months. Yes, I whispered, I made a big mistake. That evening, after Lila was asleep, I received a call from a number I didn't recognize. Mrs. Morland? This is Jennifer Chen from Family Services. I've been assigned to conduct a home study as part of your custody proceedings. A home study? It's standard procedure when there are disputes about a child's primary residence. I'll need to visit your home, interview you and your daughter, and assess the living environment. After she hung up, I looked around our apartment with new eyes. It was clean, but felt hollow somehow, like a stage set rather than a home. I realized that in all my focus on proving my desirability to Elliot, I'd stopped making our space feel warm and welcoming for Lila. I spent the next day frantically cleaning, organizing, trying to create evidence of stability. But when the social worker arrived, Her questions cut straight to the heart of things. How has Lila been adjusting to the separation? She's been asking a lot of questions about why her father moved out. How do you explain the situation to her? I hesitated, realizing that I'd been so focused on justifying my actions to adults that I hadn't considered how to honestly discuss them with my daughter. I tell her that sometimes grown-ups have disagreements. And how do you think your relationship with Mr. Byrne affected Lila? The question hung in the air like an accusation, because the truth was, I'd never seriously considered how my emotional affair might impact my daughter. I'd been so focused on my own needs, my own validation, my own proof of desirability, that I'd forgotten to protect the person who needed me most. I think, I said slowly, I made some very poor choices. After the social worker left, I sat in Lila's room, surrounded by her drawings and toys, and finally allowed myself to see the situation clearly. I had wanted to prove I could make any man want me. Instead, I had proven that I was willing to risk everything, my marriage, my daughter's stability, my family's happiness, for the temporary thrill of feeling desired. And now Daniel was proving that he wanted nothing more from me than a clean, legal end to what we'd built together. The realization that I had destroyed my own life in pursuit of validation was almost too much to bear. The family court building felt like a monument to failed relationships. As I walked through the metal detectors, I saw other couples maintaining careful distance from each other, their lawyers serving as buffers against whatever pain had brought them here. Daniel sat across the mediation room from me, flanked by Adam. He looked different, sharper somehow, more decisive. The quiet man I'd married had been replaced by someone who spoke in clear, measured sentences and maintained steady eye contact. "Mrs. Morland," the mediator began, "your husband is requesting primary custody based on documented evidence of emotional instability and behavior detrimental to your daughter's well-being. How do you respond?" My lawyer, a tired-looking woman named Patricia Reeves, had advised me to take responsibility without admitting fault. But sitting across from Daniel, seeing the careful way he'd organized his evidence, I felt the weight of everything I'd done. "I made mistakes," I said quietly. Daniel's expression didn't change, but Adam leaned forward slightly. "Can you be more specific about these mistakes?" the mediator asked. I thought about the prepared statement Patricia had helped me craft, full of language about growing apart and communication issues. But looking at Daniel, I couldn't hide behind euphemisms anymore. I had an emotional affair. I lied to my husband repeatedly. I prioritized my own needs over my daughter's stability. Patricia shot me a warning look, but I continued. I brought another man around my daughter without considering how it might affect her. I posted about my personal life on social media without thinking about how it might embarrass my family. I turned our marriage problems into public entertainment. The mediator made notes. "Mr. Morland, how do you respond?" Daniel's voice was steady. "I want what's best for Lila. She needs consistency and honesty. She needs a parent who puts her well-being first." "And you believe your wife is incapable of providing that?" "I believe my wife is capable of many things, but right now, she's not capable of putting Lila's needs before her own." The words stung because they were true. Even in this room, part of me was thinking about how this would look to others, how I could frame this story to maintain sympathy. "Mrs. Morland, the court has reviewed extensive documentation of your activities over the past several months. Text messages, social media posts, witness statements, photographic evidence. Do you dispute any of this evidence?" I looked at the thick folder in front of Daniel's lawyer. Months of my life, reduced to exhibits in a legal proceeding. "No, I don't dispute it." The court is particularly concerned about a pattern of deception and the impact on the minor child. Can you address these concerns? I thought about Lila, who had been asking increasingly difficult questions, who had started having nightmares, who had been clinging to me with desperate intensity, as if she sensed that her world was fracturing. I told myself I wasn't hurting anyone, I said. I told myself that having a friend, Having someone who paid attention to me was harmless, but I was lying to everyone, including myself. What steps have you taken to address these issues? This was where I was supposed to mention therapy, support groups, personal growth, but the truth was simpler and more damning. I ended the relationship with Elliot, but I didn't do it because I realized it was wrong. I did it because he rejected me. Patricia looked like she wanted to crawl under the table, but I couldn't stop. I wanted to prove I could make any man want me, even if it meant destroying my marriage, even if it meant humiliating my husband, even if it meant confusing my daughter. The room was quiet except for the mediator's pen scratching against paper. "And what did you prove?" she asked. I looked at Daniel, really looked at him, for the first time in months. This man who had worked every day to provide for our family, who had never missed one of Lila's school events before I started bringing Elliot, who had tried to talk to me, tried to save our marriage, even as I was systematically destroying it. I proved that I was willing to risk everything for nothing, and he proved that he wanted nothing more from me than a clean end. The mediator reviewed her notes. "Mr. Morland, what are you seeking in terms of custody and support?" "Primary custody of Lila, with reasonable visitation for Vesna. I want my daughter to have a relationship with her mother, but I need to know that relationship is stable and healthy. And financially, I want to split our assets equitably. I'm not seeking alimony, and I'm not trying to punish Vesna financially. I just want to move forward." 3 hours later, we had an agreement. Daniel would have primary custody. I would have Leela every other weekend and one evening per week, with the possibility of expanded visitation after 6 months of demonstrated stability. Our assets would be divided equally, but the apartment lease would transfer to Daniel. As we signed the papers, I realized that Daniel had gotten everything he'd asked for, not through manipulation or legal maneuvering, but simply by documenting the truth. Outside the courthouse, I tried to approach him. "Daniel, Vesna." His voice wasn't angry, just tired. "I hope you find whatever it is you're looking for, but I can't be part of that search anymore." I watched him walk away, Layla's hand in his, and understood that I had spent months trying to prove my desirability to a man who didn't really want me, while destroying my relationship with a man who had chosen me every day for 8 years. The irony was devastating. In trying to prove I could make any man want me, I had proven that I didn't know how to value the love I already had. And now, Daniel had proven that he wanted nothing more from me than the legal right to protect our daughter from my chaos. As I stood alone on the courthouse steps, I realized that the most painful part wasn't losing Daniel. It was knowing that I had lost him through my own choices, my own selfishness, my own inability to see what I had, until it was gone. The man I had taken for granted had quietly, methodically, and lawfully removed himself from my life, and I had given him every reason to do so.